When a man discovers his neighbors running down the street, he can only speculate on what they are running from. He'll have to decide if he'll join in on the running too, as writer EaPatbp tells us why. You need to whisper. The people started running down the street at 10:30, and I know that because that's the time that Jerry Springer starts. I had just sat down on the couch and was getting comfortable when the heavy sound of dozens of footsteps stole my attention away from the TV. I got up, annoyed, and looked out the front window, which had a clear view of the sidewalk and road in front of my house. Out there, I saw a few of my neighbors running down the road in front of my house. They appeared to be running from something, although they weren't screaming or anything like that. Just looking back as they ran in a group down the road. I got closer to the window and leaned forward to get a better look down the road, in the direction that everyone was coming from, but there was nothing weird or out of the ordinary that I could see. I decided that I should go outside and try to find out what was going on. But as I looked from the TV to the door, I felt less inclined to check out the cause of the commotion. Maybe it was safer for me to stay inside, but if that was true, then why was everyone else running? I walked over to the door as two women started fighting on Springer and opened it, stepping out onto my front porch. I looked to the left and saw the crowd of people now at the end of the street. I looked to the right and saw nothing. I shivered as I stood there and then realized that it was a lot colder than usual for the time of day. I pulled down the rolled up sleeves of my sweater and closed my front door behind me as I walked off the porch and onto the lawn. As I walked towards the sidewalk, I saw Frida, another one of my neighbors, coming down the road. She looked back every few seconds, her curly red hair whipping onto her face each time and causing her to slow down in order to move it. "Hey!" I shouted at her. Her head snapped in my direction and eyes widened as she placed her index finger on her lips. "Why are you running?" I asked, a little quieter. She lifted her finger and placed it back on her lips multiple times, narrowing her eyebrows in anger. I lifted my arms in a shrug, trying to silently question the reason for the running. She stopped as she reached me and leaned in. "Shh! You need to whisper," she hissed. "Why?" She looked at me shocked, as if I had just said something offensive. She opened her mouth, about to answer my question, but looked back down the street once more, and then took off running even faster. I stepped out onto the road and faced the direction that Frida had looked, but there was nothing out of the usual. I was looking at the same street, the same suburban homes with the cookie-cutter lawns and SUVs in the driveways. There was nothing there. But that's when it hit me. There was nothing there. There, at the other end of the street, where Berkeley Road began, there was nothing. No darkness, just nothing. It was difficult to process what I was looking at because there wasn't anything for me to see. The sky ended, the sidewalk and the road ended, the houses ended, and everything was replaced with emptiness. It was almost like a white screen, but it appeared to have more dimension to it, as if you could walk through the nothingness if you tried. It was unsettling, sure, but certainly not a reason for everyone to flee their homes and take off running down the street. I'm not sure how long I stood in the middle of the road, staring into oblivion, but when I finally snapped out of it and turned around to head back into my house, I realized that things had changed. Smoke clouded the sky, and in my yard stood a child that I had never seen before in my life. I approached him slowly and carefully, not knowing what to expect. "Who are you? Are you lost?" I asked. He lifted a dirty finger and placed it on his lips. You have to whisper. Why? I asked. So that she doesn't hear you. Who? The child pointed up at the sky behind me, and I turned to see what looked like a giant hand made up of the smoke descend down to the ground, pounding on the road and creating shockwaves that sent me flying backward onto my lawn. My ears rang as my head made contact with the ground, and my vision blurred as I looked up at the child standing above me. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying through the ringing and my pulse pounding in my ears. Above him, the sky became darker, and lightning began to light up across it. I watched as a strike of lightning hit a tree across the street, igniting it. I tried to roll over onto my side so that I could get up and move, but it was dizzying. I shut my eyes for a few seconds and opened them again, watching the child above me morph into a cloud of gnats in the shape of a child's body, before flying upwards and blending into the gray above. I rolled my head to the left and saw the crowd of people now running back down the street, towards the direction that they had originally come from. But they were no longer running in a group down the road. They were running wildly, some through the lawns, some on the sidewalk, and some on the road. Their mouths were open, as if in mid-scream, but no sound came out, and some were covered in blood. One person ran across me, stepping down hard on my stomach as they passed, knocking the wind out of me. I finally managed to roll onto my side as I attempted to catch my breath, struggling, but eventually pushing myself up onto all fours, and finally standing up all the way, taking deep breaths as I watched the chaos unfold around me. Some people fell to their knees, sobbing, and as I watched, the sounds slowly came back to me, and I was bombarded with them all at once, crying, yelling, thunder, running, screaming, and yet I still had no idea what was going on. Someone let out a blood-curdling scream, and I turned in its direction. The nothingness was expanding, swallowing up our street now. I watched it consume a screaming man, taking his cries with him. I stood in my spot on my lawn, watching it get closer and closer each second until it was right at the tips of my shoes. When it passed through me, there was a flash of stabbing hot pain, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the middle of the road once more. I looked behind me to see Frida a few feet away, running towards the opposite side. A few more feet in front of her were the rest of the people. I looked towards Berkeley Road and everything looked normal. At least, it did for now. This time, I didn't want to take any chances. I took off running, following Frida. As I neared the end of the street, I saw a girl around my age step out of the house on the corner. "Why are you running?" I lifted a finger to my lips. Her face contorted into confusion as I stopped once I got close to her. "You have to whisper." She stared at me, not moving or speaking. I continued to run, looking back after a few seconds to see her now standing in the middle of the road, looking down the street at the emptiness that had now consumed Berkeley Road. It was going to happen all over again, I realized. It was going to keep repeating until everyone got out. I looked back again, begging the girl to run, silently in my head. But she didn't, and above me, the sky began to fill with smoke. I stopped and completely turned around as the girl walked towards a child standing on her front lawn. Behind me, I could hear footsteps running back and getting closer. "Fuck," I whispered.